Hello, my friends. Today, the United States, India, Japan, and Australia announced the need for long term peace in Ukraine. However, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are not concerned with these statements. They want war. As a result, Russian offensive actions continue. Today, it's important to highlight that there were 163 assaults recorded in the past 24 hours, following 217 combat engagements reported the day before. This marks another record, indicating that the Russians have no intentions of stopping. Now let's move on to the situation along the front line, starting with the hottest areas. In the Chasiv Yar region, the Russians are persistently trying to break through the northern flank to encircle the town. Recently, they even managed to secure positions briefly, but the Ukrainian forces pushed them back. Today, the Russians are still attempting to break through and regain a foothold. Meanwhile, fighting continues near Andriivka and Bila Hora, but no significant changes along the front lines have been reported in the past 24 hours. The Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks. In the Toretsk direction, unfortunately, although not significant, the Russians have still made some gains. They managed to advance further into Toretsk itself, where street fighting continues. They are also trying to expand the section of the front they boldly stretch toward Sherbinivka. As a result, they are breaking through to Leonidivka and, of course, aiming to encircle Myroliubivka, where fighting also remains intense. Overall, the situation is extremely difficult, with continuous shelling at maximum intensity. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians are still attempting to break through near Myroliubivka and Vuhledar. The situation is challenging, but here the Ukrainian forces are managing to hold back the Russian pressure. The situation is slightly worse in the areas of Krasny Yar, Krutый Yar, and Novogorodivka, where the Russians have continued their attacks and made some progress near Novogorodivka. The fighting for Selidove remains ongoing, and the situation is particularly dire around Tsukurene. Here, the Russians managed to capture Ukrainsk, made significant advances, and are now actively storming Tsukurene itself, as well as Hernik and Zhelanny Druge. It's clear they are pushing seriously toward Kurakhove, and they have a shelling in the area continues without pause. In the Kurakhove direction, the Russians have also made significant advances across the fields. The distance from the furthest front line to the outskirts of Kurakhove is now just 5 kilometers and 300 meters. Additionally, the situation near Katerynivka is gradually worsening as the Russians continue to advance there and the fighting hasn't ceased. Over the past day, around 25 assaults were recorded, which is a very high number. The situation is no easier around Vuhledar. Here, the Russians are advancing toward Bogoyavlenka and attempting to break through to Vuhledar directly, as well as from the direction of the village of Pavlivka along the road. There are already reports stating that the situation is critical. Ukrainian soldiers on the ground have reported that there are now threats to the city. What is happening today confirms previous observations I've mentioned in earlier updates that the Russians are actively using FPV drones on frontline settlements to launch a large-scale offensive. And, in fact, we're witnessing that offensive now. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians are also attempting to break through new sections of the front near Gulyai-Pole, but here the Ukrainian forces are successfully holding them back. Additionally, fighting continues near Robotyne, Novodanilivka and Novoandriivka, with shelling at maximum intensity, although no changes have been reported over the past day. In the Kherson direction, only shelling has been recorded so far, and the Russians are no longer conducting attacks in the islands areas. We are still waiting to see how the situation will develop. The Ukrainian armed forces are also actively using FPV drones to strike Russian positions on the left bank. Now let's turn to the situation in the Luhansk region. Here, as before, the Russians have been unable to advance near Myroliubivka despite conducting daily assaults and continuous attacks in the Vuhledar area. However, over the past day, there have been no changes. In the direction of Crimea, fighting continues near Nevske, Terne, and Toretsk. The Ukrainian forces have successfully repelled all attacks, and despite minor Russian advances in the fields near Nevske in recent days, the Russians haven't achieved any further successes. In the Svatove area, the Russians continue their attacks near Lozova and Stelmachivka. Unfortunately, they have managed to get closer to the settlements and the situation remains difficult. However, the Ukrainian forces are maintaining their defense as much as possible despite persistent Russian pressure. Further south, the Russians are also breaking through in the areas of Chernyshina, Druželiubivka, Kurakhove, and Makiyivka. After capturing Novoyegorivka, the Russians have increased their shelling and assaults even more, making the situation highly challenging. In the Kupiansk direction, the Russians continue their attacks near Sinkivka, with the general staff reported combat engagements near Stepova Novoselivka and Tabaivka. However, no changes to the front lines have been recorded in this area yet. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has arrived in the United States. Earlier, he mentioned that this week will be decisive for the future development of events. We are awaiting the outcome of the upcoming talks. Preliminary reports from Voice of America indicate that President Biden hasn't yet made a decision on allowing Ukraine to strike deep into Russian territory with long-range missiles. So we continue to wait for further developments. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.